What if everything you thought about this family was built on secrets, and now the truth is finally breaking through, one shocking moment at a time? Stay with me, because what gets revealed next changes everything. And if you love deep drama and real stories, hit subscribe right now, because you do not want to miss what's coming next. The moment that question is asked, everything shifts, because it is not just a simple curiosity. It is a loaded question, filled with emotion, history, and unresolved tension. Is Christine still your sister wife? And before anyone even answers, there is a pause that says more than words ever could, because everyone already knows that nothing is the same anymore. And when the answer finally comes, it does not come with clarity or peace, it comes with pain. A kind of pain that lingers beneath the surface and refuses to be ignored. Because when someone you once considered family decides they no longer want a relationship with you, it does not just close a chapter, it rewrites the entire story. And suddenly, what used to feel permanent begins to feel fragile, like it could disappear at any moment. And that is exactly where this story begins. Not with certainty, but with confusion. Not with unity, but with distance. And what makes it even more intense is the way each person involved seems to be holding on to a completely different version of reality. Because while one side is trying to accept that things have changed, another side is still trying to hold on to what once was, as if refusing to let go could somehow undo everything that has already happened. And that tension creates a kind of emotional pull that draws you in deeper, because you start to realize that this is not just about one decision or one moment. This is about years of unspoken feelings building up quietly in the background until they could no longer be ignored. And when those feelings finally come to the surface, they do not come out gently. They come out all at once, changing everything in their path. And as the conversation continues, it becomes clear that the pain is not just about losing a relationship. It is about losing a dream. Because there was a vision once, a shared belief that this family would grow together, stay together, and support each other through every stage of life. And that vision was not just an idea. It was something that shaped decisions, influenced behavior, and created expectations that felt unbreakable. But now that vision is being questioned, not openly, but in subtle ways, through words that carry more weight than they seem at first.
Really means to be close to someone. Because it becomes clear that not all relationships within this family were as strong as they appeared on the surface. And that realization challenges the image that was presented for so long. Because while there may have been moments of unity, there were also underlying tensions that were never fully addressed. And over time, those tensions created distance that eventually became too significant to ignore. And what is particularly striking is the way this distance is described. Not with anger, but with honesty. Because instead of blaming others, there is an acknowledgement that certain connections simply were not there. And that kind of clarity adds a new dimension to the narrative, because it shifts the focus away from conflict and toward understanding. And in doing so, it allows for a more nuanced interpretation of what has happened and why. And as the conversation continues, the theme of trust begins to take center stage. Because when someone says they no longer feel safe in a relationship, it changes the entire dynamic. It moves the discussion beyond disagreements and into the realm of emotional security. And that is where things become even more serious. Because trust is not something that can be easily rebuilt once it has been broken. And when that trust is gone, it often signals that the relationship itself has reached a point where continuing it would cause more harm than good. And that realization can be incredibly difficult to accept, especially when there is a history involved. But it also represents a turning point, a moment where decisions are made not based on obligation, but on what is truly needed for personal well-being. And as more details come to light, it becomes evident that this turning point did not happen overnight. It was the result of a gradual process, one that involved reflection, reevaluation, and ultimately the courage to make a choice that would change everything. And that is what makes this story so powerful. Because it is not just about the end of a relationship, it is about the journey that led to that ending. And the strength it takes to walk away from something that once felt like it would last forever. You might think at this point the story has already revealed everything. But that is exactly where it pulls you deeper. Because just when it feels like the truth is finally coming into focus, another layer begins to unfold. And this time, it is not just about emotions. It is about power, expectations, and the quiet transformation of a dynamic that once claimed to be balanced, but now feels anything but. Because as the
begins to influence the way each person views the future. Because for some, the path forward involves adapting, finding ways to fit into the evolving dynamic, even if it means compromising parts of themselves. While for others, the path forward involves stepping away, choosing personal peace over collective unity. And that choice is never easy, because it comes with consequences, not just for the individual, but for the entire group. And yet, it is a choice that becomes unavoidable when the gap between expectations and reality grows too wide to ignore. And as the story continues to build momentum, another layer is introduced, one that brings a new level of complexity to the situation. The concept of belief and how it shapes the understanding of relationships. Because in this context, the idea of separation is not defined solely by actions or agreements. It is deeply connected to personal faith and the interpretation of what it means to be bound to someone. And that adds an entirely new dimension to the narrative, because it means that even when one person feels that the relationship has ended, another may believe that it still exists in a different form. And that difference in belief creates a kind of emotional disconnect that is difficult to reconcile, because it is not based on facts that can be proven or disproven. It is based on deeply held convictions that are resistant to change. And as these beliefs are expressed, it becomes clear that they are not just influencing how the present is being understood, but also how the future is being imagined. Because for some, the idea of connection extends beyond this life into something larger, something that carries meaning even after physical separation. And that perspective adds a layer of emotional weight that is hard to fully grasp, because it ties personal relationships to a broader sense of purpose and destiny. And when that sense of purpose is disrupted, it can feel like more than just a loss. It can feel like an entire worldview is being challenged. And as this tension unfolds, another voice offers a different perspective, one that is grounded in the present moment rather than abstract concepts, one that emphasizes personal happiness, growth, and the importance of finding fulfillment, even if it means redefining what relationships look like. And that perspective serves as a counterbalance to the more rigid interpretations, because it reminds us that while beliefs can provide structure, they can also create limitations if they are not allowed to evolve. And as these contrasting viewpoints continue to interact, the narrative becomes increasingly layered, because it is no longer just about what has happened. By now, it feels like everything that could be said has already been laid out. But the truth is, this is where the story becomes even more intense, because the surface level conflict slowly gives way to something deeper, something more revealing about intentions, perception, and the way narratives can be shaped depending on who is telling the story and why. And just when it seems like there might be some shared understanding forming, a new contradiction appears, one that shifts the focus toward a relationship that has been quietly fading for a long time. And what makes this moment so powerful is not just what is being said, but what is being implied. Because when one person begins to describe events in a way that suggests there was still hope, still a possibility of rebuilding something that had already been declared over, it creates a sense of confusion that is hard to ignore. And suddenly, the audience is faced with two completely different versions of the same situation. One that speaks of closure and acceptance, and another that hints at missed opportunities and interference. And that contrast immediately raises questions about credibility, about memory, and about whether certain details are being remembered accurately or perhaps reinterpreted to fit a narrative that feels more comfortable or more strategic. And as this tension builds, it becomes clear that this is no longer just about relationships ending. It is about how those endings are explained and who is held responsible for them. And that is where the emotional stakes rise once again. Because when responsibility is shifted or blurred, it can create doubt, not only for the people involved, but for anyone trying to understand what really happened. And as the story continues to unfold, the idea of reconciliation is brought into focus.
but instead of offering clarity, it introduces even more uncertainty.
That there may be aspects of these relationships that are not fully visible, that exist beneath the surface, influencing everything without being directly acknowledged. And as the audience becomes more aware of this possibility, it changes the way the entire situation is perceived, because it introduces the idea that what is being seen may only be part of a much larger and more complex reality. And that awareness keeps the suspense alive, because it leaves room for new information, for shifts in perspective, and for the possibility that the story is still evolving in ways that have not yet been revealed. And as the focus returns to the individuals involved, the emotional impact becomes even more apparent, because behind every statement, every explanation, and every contradiction, there are real feelings, real experiences, and real consequences. And those elements cannot be separated from the narrative, because they are what give it meaning and depth. And as each person continues to navigate their own path forward, it becomes clear that the outcomes will not be the same for everyone. Because while some may find closure, others may continue to grapple with unanswered questions and unresolved emotions. And that difference highlights the reality that endings are not always clean or final. Sometimes they are messy, incomplete, and open to interpretation. And as this understanding settles in, the story reaches a point where it is no longer about finding a definitive answer, but about recognizing the complexity of human relationships and the many factors that influence how they begin, how they change, and how they ultimately come to an end. And even though there may not be a clear resolution, the journey itself offers valuable insight into the nature of connection, communication, and the importance of perspective. Because in the end, what matters most is not just what happened, but how those involved choose to move forward with what they have learned, and how they use those lessons to shape the next chapter of their lives, leaving behind what no longer serves them while still carrying the parts of the experience that helped them grow. In the end, nothing stayed the same. The truth came out, the bonds were tested, and the reality is clearer than ever. Some walked away, some held on, but everything changed. And if you want more real stories and shocking breakdowns like this, hit subscribe right now, because the next one is even bigger.